So this one goes out to the homie Nick, who was asking me to enlighten him a little bit or give him a breakdown on the battlefront between normies, schizos, and psychopaths. And I'm going to be honest, I spent the better part of my morning thinking about this, and this is what I've got to say. So, first things first, let's take a look at the battlefield. The battlefield is comprised of three parts. We have the psychopaths on top, and then we have the normies and the schizos on the bottom, on the bottom equally. And the way this triangle works is the psychopaths are able to take their lack of empathy and just, willingness to dominate at the expense of others. And they will exert that and influence normies to fall into line, and effectively by scaring the normies to fall into line, they're able to extract value. And some people go so far as to say they extract like emotional energy. They call it loosh. um, but yeah, they get off on this, they value it, they eat it up, it sustains them. The third part of the triangle are the schizos, and the schizos are the people that are the pattern recognizers and the ones that don't fall for the propaganda that is being put out there by the psychopaths. And I feel like COVID was a huge um, activation event for a lot of people who effectively had their trust in the in the government and the leadership that rushed to get this vaccine out there, effectively, turning fear up to 11 in order to try to, see what they can get out of it, right? And I think there was enough people that felt like the COVID response and the way that things unfolded, that was enough to get them to be suspicious of everything else in terms of how it is that we got here. Like, what are we doing here? Why do we live in such a world where it's a pain in the ass to do anything? You have to grind away and, in certain instances, sell your soul in order to sustain yourself, in order to survive, so that someday you may have a good day. And, a lot of people, especially in America, the dream is you do what you can, you make $1 billion, and then you retire, meaning that you're free to do whatever you choose as long as you're able to reach the amount of financial security or amount of resources that you think will sustain you until you die. But all of this is wrapped up in especially in America nowadays, a lack of any coherent or agreed upon big picture idea of what it is that happens after we die. And I feel like the illumination and the freedom that was promised by the founding fathers was kind of stolen away when the fear-based proselytizing and making people fall in line became the cultural norm, as far as the big mythology that a lot of people believe. The way that things are playing out in the world right now, this model that I've just described for you kind of makes sense. But the entire point that I want to make by bringing this to light, and I think the important thing that we all have a responsibility to do is, once we're able to see this pattern that seems to exist, the Epstein files are the perfect example of the just the separation that seems to exist between a certain class of people. When I say the word class, like it's not a money thing. It's a mindset, it's a perspective thing. But some people believe that they are better and above others, and they'll use that self identity and um, who they believe themselves to be, and they'll use that position of power to keep others in line and to extract value from them. Ultimately, I think the thing we need to realize is the major tool that the psychopaths use on normies to make them scared and subservient is the idea of culture. Terence McKenna very famously said, culture is not your friend. And I think what he means by that is culture is perpetuated and carried forward by the psychopaths who are able to use the way that the cultural artifacts from our past, they build them up and, you know, add a bunch of what's the word I'm looking for? They add a bunch of like history and like, oh, this is really important to the culture so that the people feel indebted to carry that culture forward, even if that means the culture is going against what it is that what is true to them. That's just, the primary example in which the way psychopaths are able to manipulate normies. And then we have the schizos who are essentially attacked by the normies because they feel like the schizos are falling out of line and putting us at risk. The schizos are over there saying, hey, this whole thing is a sham. There's no reason things have to be like this. If things we don't like it, we should be able to change it. And instead of taking the moment for what it is now and striving for the better thing that we know is out there that we can go looking for and spend our lives trying to improve the situations we were born into, instead we get our minds perverted into thinking that we're instead, carrying something and dragging it into the future because that's our duty. And I don't think that's the way to go. Yeah, I've been rambling for quite a while now. As you can probably tell, I've been thinking about this a lot. But ultimately, again, the final say here is it's not so much to label yourself as a normie or a schizo or a psycho. That's all like tongue in cheek. Labels are just fun ways to that we're say, that we group things as we see it, but it doesn't define them as a whole. The important thing to realize is that those are just labels. This is just a framework. It's all in an effort to try to get you to understand the world better and to live a more fulfilling life. Anyway, thanks, Nick, for the question, and I hope that answered your curiosity.